The case of William Tyrrell has captured our nation, a 3-year-old boy in foster care who seemingly disappeared into thin air. Former homicide detective Gary Jubelin was sensationally thrown off the case into the missing toddler when he was charged with illegally recording a prime suspect. He's faced a 2-week criminal trial over this and will tomorrow find out his verdict in the local court case that the New South Wales Police brought against him. Jubelin has led an extraordinary 34-year career in the force, during which time he led so many other important investigations, including into the Bowraville murders and the Levinson murder. Thank you for your time tonight, Gary Jubelin. I appreciate you joining us. And how are you feeling ahead of the verdict being handed down tomorrow?
Thank you, Sharri. Obviously a little bit nervous about it, but I'm glad it's finally coming to a conclusion one way or the other. So, yeah, I've got nothing to be disappointed about. It was an open trial or open hearing, and that was my main concern, that the courts were open to the public. So I'll just have to wait. But yes, it will be a nervous 24 hours. Yeah.
Look, police failed to find William Tyrrell. They failed so far to find William Tyrrell, and there were a number of missteps in the investigation. There were also attempts to discredit you with the leak of internal files, and now, of course, this case went to court. Do you think you were made a scapegoat for this failure to find William Tyrrell?
Look, I think probably a scapegoat is not the right word. I've never seen this situation as a scapegoat, or myself as a scapegoat. I think perhaps the matter could have been handled a completely different way that would not have had an impact on the investigation, on the William Tyrrell investigation. But I think it's probably too high a point, or too high a level to say as a scapegoat. I don't see myself as a scapegoat. So
it could have been investigated while you were still in the job investigating the disappearance of William Tyrrell, because of course you were removed at a very critical point in the investigation.
Yes, I was removed with no notice, only a couple of weeks out from when the inquest was due to commence, and I haven't had the opportunity or been allowed, more importantly, to do any handover whatsoever. So I dare say there has been an impact. I know that investigators are still working on the investigation. I hope that is the case, and I hope that it's properly resourced and people are committed to it. I don't suggest by any means that you take me away from the investigation. It has no hope, but I think it would have been more beneficial to the investigation if I was allowed to, at the very least, do a handover.
Yeah. Look, police tried to keep this whole case secret, and they tried to have the court case operate behind closed doors. They weren't successful in that, and you did face court publicly, with it all conducted, you know, in open court. What do you think they wanted to hide? What were they trying to keep secret that they wanted this behind closed doors?
Look, I don't know exactly what was operating on their mind. No organisation likes to air their dirty laundry, so to speak, in a court matter. I had concerns that a certain narrative had been put out about who I was and what the situation that led to my resignation from the police force, what led up to that. I had concerns that with a closed court I wouldn't be able to justify my position. I maintained from the outset that I had a lawful reason to record the conversations and an operational need. Things that came out of the court at least supported the position I took right from the start when these allegations were put to me.
There's been quite the astounding revelation now that police wanted to get the William Tyrrell case off their books and send it to the cold case files. How hard did you fight against this move?
I fought very hard to continue on. I suggest that there were lines of inquiry that had to be properly explored, and it hadn't been taken to conclusion as far as I was concerned. And I led the investigation for 4 years. I took the investigation over 5 months after William's disappearance, and as the investigation supervisor, which was the title of my role, I was responsible for every direction and strategies relating to the investigation whilst I held that position.
There was the most amazing anecdote that emerged of you having a picture of William on your desk and a conversation that emerged with one of your superiors about trying to move on from this case and ultimately sending it to the unsolved homicide. You know, how emotionally attached were you? How much did you want to fight to see an answer for the presumed murder of William Tyrrell?
I give a commitment to victims' families in homicides, and I've been doing this for a very long time, that I will do everything humanly possible to find out what's happened to their loved one. So I was very dedicated to it. But it's not just myself, Sharri. There's many officers that have the same dedication and commitment. And I don't think that I think it would be unfair to say that there's anyone within the New South Wales Police that wouldn't want to find out what's happened to William.
Well, sure, but there were police who tried to send it to the cold case file, so they might not have been as dedicated as you. But look, I want to ask you, I mean, I know you can't go into evidence on here on live television, and, you know, the coronial inquest into the disappearance is ongoing, but it's been put on hold because of coronavirus. But in your gut, what do you believe happened to William Tyrrell?
Look, it would be wrong of me to speculate on television on what I think's happened to William Tyrrell. I had certain case theories. None of them were conclusive. I'm hoping, and I still hope, that the answers will be forthcoming during the inquest. But my position is that we just should not give up on an investigation like this. You know, a 3-year-old child disappears from a quiet street in a small country town. We should find out what's happened to that child, and we should never give up on it.
Broadly speaking, do you think it is most likely the scenario that he was taken by a paedophile? And I know that, you know, this case, you know, the officers working on this case, and we know this from Caroline Overington's book and podcast, she's at The Australian, that, you know, really people had to look at a lot of paedophilia material to try and see if William Tyrrell was out there. You know, is this a bigger problem than parents realise?
Look, that was just one line of the inquiry that we uncovered. When we look at the situation where a child disappears, obviously we explore that aspect of it. Certain things have come to the public's attention. I make no apology for what we uncovered during the course of an investigation, but look, that is I think the public feel more comfortable if it is something, if the person that's taken William is a paedophile, because it fits that description of the bad guy. But we looked at all possibilities on what happened to William, and leading an investigation or working on an investigation, it's important that we don't have tunnel vision. So we explored all options, and one of the options that the public were aware of, and quite rightly so, we were exploring if a paedophile had potential involvement in William's disappearance.
Look, do you know, obviously we can't go into the court material and we'll find a verdict tomorrow, but do you regret now that you made those illegal recordings of someone who you considered a key suspect who might have been close to making a confession?
Simple answer to that question, no. I always maintained that I had a lawful right and an operational need. Based on the information that I was acting upon and the circumstances that I was presented with, I believe that was an appropriate course of action. And yeah, again, because the verdict's been handed down, so I'm choosing my words carefully, but all the evidence played out in court, and I'll accept the decision of the magistrate. It'd be quite hypocritical of me if I complain about it. I've put people before the courts for the past 30 years, and so I'll accept the decision. But I've always maintained that what I did was for the right reason. And most importantly, and this is part of my concern, is that the narrative came out that I was this rogue cop. I wasn't a rogue cop, I was doing my job. And my job was to find out what happened to William Tyrrell, and the recording of those conversations related directly to that.
Thank you very much, Gary Jubelin, for coming on the program tonight, and we'll certainly be thinking of you tomorrow and waiting to see what that verdict is.
Thank you, Sharri.
Deputy Editor of the Sunday Telegraph, Claire Harvey, has been examining Jubelin's case closely. Claire, thank you for joining us. Jubelin was removed from the William Tyrrell investigation at a critical stage, as he just said. What was behind this decision by New South Wales Police, do you think, to pursue this so publicly instead of deal with it as an internal matter?
Well, to me, the only way it makes sense to have a highly regarded cop, one of the state's most famous police officers, sit through a criminal trial in a local court over something that was always going to yield an interesting insight into the case that he was working on, is if the strategy was to have it all done behind closed doors. And as we found out on the first day of the local court matter, that's exactly what the police strategy was. A barrister for the police commissioner stood up and said, Your Honour, I'd like to request that the court be closed for the entire duration of the hearing. fortunately, I and other members of the media had anticipated that, and we organised a solicitor to come and argue the media's case, and in effect argue the public's case, why the public had a right to know what was going on in this hearing. The magistrate, Ross Hudson, took the media's side and left the court open. So I think, given that the trial turned into effectively the what happened to William Tyrrell inquest, and looked in great detail, that must have been very embarrassing for some people in the police, at what had happened inside that strike force. I think it only made sense to have that trial proceed if you thought it wasn't going to be public, and that calculation was clearly wrong.
What do you think? I mean, you just mentioned there that it was embarrassing for the police, and I think it was. You know, what do you think were some of the key things that emerged from this that they would have been horrified that was ultimately made public?
Oh, you know, take your pick. There was all sorts of operational stuff about the way the investigation unfolded. So there was evidence from a whole range of police who were working on the inquiry as to limited resources, confusion about what was supposed to be happening at the start of the inquiry before Gary Jubelin took it over. There was a lot of evidence about listening devices not working. They'd placed listening devices in the home of a person of interest in the investigation. As it turned out, those listening devices were incredibly unreliable. They either didn't work, they couldn't capture the words that were being said, or their batteries ran out, or you know, it was a deeply disturbing insight into the resourcing of what should have been, you would think, the biggest investigation in the state. So that was the operational side of it. Then there was the evidence that senior police wanted this case sent off to the cold case unit, to unsolved homicide. Gary Jubelin himself gave evidence that Scott Cook, who was the new incoming head of homicide, said to him, "No one cares about that kid," which is what you alluded to earlier. Scott Cook issued a statement via the police commissioner shortly after that evidence was heard, denying that he ever said that, but he wasn't cross-examined. And then William Tyrrell's foster mother stepped into the witness box herself to say that the same senior officer had approached her outside the coronial inquest and said, "Look, we're trying to find William, but there are a lot of other people who are grieving, and we've got a lot of other cases on. You know, essentially, you're not our top priority." She gave evidence for Gary Jubelin. So,
I mean, it's just appalling when you hear those words again from Stuart Cook. You know, if they are correct, but there were two accounts that suggested he wanted to move it off the books. You know, imagine being a parent who has lost their 3-year-old son, and the attitude of New South Wales Police was that they wanted to have fewer unsolved cases on their books, so just send it off.
Yeah, I mean, I think you know, we all understand that senior police are under pressure to keep cases moving. You know, they can't investigate everything forever, and no one would think that they should. But this is a 3-year-old boy who went missing from his grandmother's front yard, and 4 years on, no one had been found. So, if any case could be kept open, you would think it would be this one. So there's the sort of the logistical reason to move it on, and then I think it was just a poor form of words. Whether he said that to Gary Jubelin or not, whether he said it to William Tyrrell's mother or not, you know, it wasn't a good look for the cops. And it comes back to that point that if you're going to take a 34-year cop to court in a local court matter, then you would either want to make sure that the case was pretty cut and dried, or you'd want to make sure that the court was closed. And that latter point is the variable that they couldn't control. The magistrate just said, "No, I'm not closing the court." So the cops had to proceed.
Yeah. Claire Harvey, thank you very much. Appreciate your insights into the case. And of course, you've now hired Gary Jubelin as a columnist at the Sunday Telegraph, and he's going to be doing some podcasts as well.
Yeah, he's an investigative journalist, and he's doing a really cool podcast for us too.
I'm sure the New South Wales Police have got a lot more to worry about if he's an investigative journalist now.